to Romana.
Okay, wonderful. Assalamualaikum, good morning, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. One of the questions that we often ask ourselves as skilled coaches is why we have to work twice as hard to create half the change that we require in our clients. Perhaps this is because we are listening to their words rather than the real conversation happening in the pauses within the identity of the client and the signals that are being given off by the client. I think oftentimes there is a tendency to miss that. So, the speaker you're about to hear has spent 15 years decoding exactly what coaches miss, what we miss, and how to see these changes and the occurrences of these nuances in real time. So, meet the creator of Mindfluence, who has delivered over 5,000 discussions, presentations across 4 continents, from Stanford to Cape Town, Brisbane to Berlin, and online coaching communities all over the world. As an MSc, a PhD, an ICF member, a Master NLP practitioner and trainer, extended disc practitioner and trainer, mindset and mindfluence certified, he has advanced breathwork capabilities as an instructor and is a Blanchard affiliate coach and trainer. He has successfully coached leaders across uh, more than 20 countries, managed entrepreneurs and change makers for virtual and online discussions and transformations that actually last for a longer time and are visible, therefore, within the patterns that we just discussed. And here's something you might not know. He still catches himself saying, I should instead of I want, and has to pause mid sentence to notice one's own identity. I guess that's gravity at work. So, everyone, please help me welcome Prajesh Chhanabhai to this wonderful session. And we are hoping to gain insights from this illustrious speaker at this point.
Thank you so much, Romana. Thank you so much. Kia ora, assalamu alaikum. Thank you everybody for welcoming me. And before I get started, today's presentation or session, you can engage as much as you want. So if your camera's on, that's cool. If it's not on, that's all good. But all that I would love for you is if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, or even observations, just put them into the chat because we're here to learn together. So I'm going to get my slides going because we always love this first bit here. Hopefully you can all see my slides. Right, there we go. So I'm sitting here today. It is the 26th of December. It is a public holiday here in New Zealand. It is 7 p.m. And when Khadija asked me if I wanted to speak, I was like, yeah, why not? Because I want to talk about this topic that is really, really close and dear to my heart, which is this concept of mindfluence. And the reason why I want to talk about it is we're all sitting here today as coaches or coaches to be or interested in coaching. And my first question I want to put out there to all of you in the group is, first question is, what do you listen for most when you're coaching? Okay, I just want to sit with that answer there. So a lot of us in our coaching, we listen to words, we listen to the explicit content. When we train, we think about that there. We think about the narrative that our client gives us, and we think about the problem that's presented. That's what when you're starting your coaching. Then when we elevate to great coaches, the great coaches, they listen to patterns, they look for linguistic structures, they listen to emotional cadence, looking for what's emphasized and what's avoided. Awesomeness. Then we have coaches that are next level. These coaches, what do is they listen to things that the client is not consciously aware of. And I say this because every single one of us right now, as we're sitting here today, are doing things that we are consciously not aware of and consciously that we are aware of. Because what we're doing is we're just always broadcasting things. These coaches listen to what I like to call the identity. So over the next 45 minutes to 50 minutes, I'm going to talk about this concept of mindfluence, and hopefully it will help you in your coaching practice or think about how you think about other people in your world. So today, what we're going to cover is we're going to talk about why coaches miss what matters. I'm going to introduce something, the three pillars of mindfulness, which is identity gravity, the meaning-making loops, and human signals. I'm talking about how to apply this. And I'm going to give you an example before I even start this. Where this all came from is like Dr. Romana kindly said, is I've been doing this for a very long time in the coaching world, and I've been working in academia for a very long time. And I was once coaching a senior executive, and super credential. They had a PhD, an MBA, they had a double PhD, super successful, making lots and lots of money. Um, but they came to visit me and they said, "Hey, Prajesh, I need to be coached because I want to change the way I lead. I want to be a different kind of leader. I want to make bolder decisions because I'm making decisions, but they're within my safe comfort zone." So I started working with this person here, and we've been together for about 6 or 7 weeks. And I noticed every time there was one step forward, two steps back. They were saying all the right things in the coaching sessions, but actually nothing was changing in their life. But in one particular lesson, I remember this very, very, very vividly because in that moment, what I was doing at the past was listening to their words, but I started listening to what their body was showing me. And every time we approach this conversation about the actual behavior they need to shift to become, this bolder leader here, the conversation that to have, what I noticed is the actual body changed before their words did. The body changed before the words did. Their voice became quieter, faster, their breathing slowed down, and their shoulders dropped and changed a little bit. And also they looked different ways. So what that was telling me is the body was signaling a threat before it even was activating it. I then addressed and I said, "Hey, I noticed that when we talk, all these things happen." And what happened is this person went very silent and said, "This is what I've been doing for a very, very long time. I've been doing it for every coach I go to, I do exactly the same thing. Because nobody sees this behavior of me, I just revert back to my childhood behavior of the threat." When we had that one conversation, everything changed for this person here. Why? Because we went to the emotional depth of what they're coming from. And then we went away from the problem and we looked at the identity structure that this person was having because the identity was formed a long time before they became the successful leader. And this is where we think about people are always telling you who they are, but really with their words. So for the next few slides, hopefully we can get to that there. And the first trick I'm going to show you is this little thing here called the Herman grid. Don't know if you've seen the Herman grid before. And I'm going to ask you just to try and focus on a single dot somewhere if you can. Pick a dot that you can, hopefully it works. Pick a dot. And what you'll notice is every time you blink, the dot changes. It changes where it is because your brain is just focusing on one particular side. There's actually no dots there, but the brain is creating these dots here. So as I put the slide out here, I want you to think about when you're going to a coaching session, either as a coach, as a client, what are you seeing versus what is actually being said? What is happening versus what is not happening? So this is a nice little example of how the brain tricks us into things that we do sometimes. So first things first, this is interactive. So what I'd love you all to do is I'd love you all to name a signal. So what does that mean? That means I want you all to think about the last high stakes coaching session you've had or conversation that you have had. Have a think about that. And as you're doing that there, I want you to think about as you had the session here, think about the language that is being said versus the body and the tone. And as you think about that, I want you to think about what incongruences did you notice versus the words and the body. And just put that in the chat if you notice there was any incongruences. And think about any of the sessions that you've had. Body was straight and shallow, but the client said everything is okay. Yep. Emotions, yes. So you're noticing there's an incongruency between what is being said versus the body language. And this is really important as you think about ourselves as skill coaches. And before I carry on, I also want to acknowledge that today I'm speaking to some amazing people in the room here. There's coaches at the highest level. There are MCCs, there are PhDs, there are ACCs, there are level one coaches, the whole range. And each one of you is working with layers of complexity, layers of ambiguity, and high stakes transformation, whatever that you're doing. But as you all know, surface level interventions don't create lasting change. And you'll see why as we go forward today. So why is this important? This is important because when we think about our coaching sessions, if we think about what's at stake, the stakes are, we have this number, when I was doing my training, I was told that for real transformation to happen, it requires between 8 to 12 sessions. I've got a question mark around that there. But this is what we get trained to do as you are a beginner coach. But as you think about reading the body language and the words that are being said, we can drop that down dramatically. Also, what we can do is we understand this year we have the same transformation, but at a much quicker time. And also it requires better outcomes for yourself and for the client. It's always about client focus here. So this is what happens when we think about what's at stake. Now, like I said before, people are always telling you who they are really with their words. Now, I want you to think about this out of a coaching context and think about your lives, your everyday lives. Think about this how many times when you talk to your spouse, maybe, or to people that you're working with, students, think about how people are always telling you what they are or what they want to do, but think about their body language or their tone. So this is a quote that I'd love you to screenshot or take a picture, and I want you to remind yourself that, hey, when we're having any conversation in life, just remember that people are always telling you who they are, but really with their words. So this is where I think about this concept of mindfluence. So mindfluence, we've all heard of mindset, we've all heard of I keep on with we've heard of mindset, we've heard of mindfulness, and if we take the two together, we combine this word called mindfluence, which is basically how the mind affects what we're doing. But the way I like to define it in coaching, it's about the ability to understand how identity, meaning, and behavior interact as one integrated system, and how that system, if we can influence the system, we can then have change that becomes really, really sustainable and possible. Key thing to remember is as we are coaches, it's not about changing people. It's about understanding the architecture, the psychological, the linguistic, and the somatic architecture that we all have. Because then as coaches, what that means is we can then facilitate conditions where they can see themselves clearly enough to choose differently. Okay? This is what it is. Now, what is not though, before we carry on and talk about what mindfulness, let me talk about other frameworks and show you how it enhances what you already know. Mindfulness is not NLP. We heard about all these crazy things that I've done. It's not NLP. It's not DISC. It's not a personality assessment. All those are fantastic tools and frameworks we can use. Um, what happens is basically this is a restructuring without addressing those tools, but looking at the identity layer. When we think about all our training, how it integrates what we already practice. Everything that we do integrates with the ICF core competencies. So mindfulness takes all that and just enhances it. And if you work with any development frameworks, whether it is, the SOAR model, the Oscar model, whatever models you do, what it does is it allows you to work away from the how, but works on how to create the identity. The key word I'm going to use today is going to be identity. And also what it does is it changes the word from not an and, not instead of. So what I'm teaching you today is not about and or instead of, it's part of it all. So these are the concepts here. Okay, what I like to think about it, this is where it's coaching with a different kind of lens. It's not therapy, it's not diagnosis, it's not trauma, it's just taking a lens, and what we're doing is just shifting the way we think about it. And so if we look at these pictures here, we have a lens here. We think about the world, we shift the way we look at the lens. It thinks about how you're going to affect how different things work. The key thing to remember is, as we all know in coaching, mindfluence is not about therapy, it's not about diagnosis, about trauma. It's looking at identity, the identity that people come with. It's about facilitating awareness. We're not installing any identity. We're basically looking at the identity that the clients come from. We help the clients look at their own patterns so they can see them, because pattern recognition is what we need to do for them. So why does identity matter? So here's what happens when you try and change behavior without looking at identity. Here's the behavior, here's the identity. If you don't think about identity, what happens is you create internal conflict. So one part of them wants to create a new behavior, another part rejects it because it doesn't match their sense of self. And every single one of this room here today has seen this. We've seen a client, or we've seen ourselves, we make progress for a couple of weeks, In fact, it's very timely. Think about in a week's time, the world is going to go on New Year's resolutions. January's coming along. People are going to go for the next, 3 or 4 weeks, get into it, but then they stop. Okay? They then start regressing. We think of people that want to go to the gym. We think of leaders that commit to delegation, but then they all collapse. Why? Because it's not about willpower. It's not a lack of consistency. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not about motivation. It's about the mind. Again, it's about the brain. The amygdala is protecting us. Okay? It's what we call identity coherence. It's not matching. So if you think about coherence, you've got to have a match. At this point in time, there's no match. And what happens then at that point in time is any mismatch in the identity coherence will win over any goal achievement anytime, unless you work at the right level. So the levels I want to talk about are these three things here, the three pillars here. So these three pillars, what they're going to do is they're going to give us something called identity structure, meaning making patterns, and something I call somatic signals or human signals. Because when you look at these things here, you can understand any human in any conversation. So yes, we're here to coach, but let's go away from coaching and think about every single conversation we have. When we start understanding these basic concepts here, what it does for you is you stop working very hard and you stop trying to feel like you're pushing against something that's invisible, a resistance. What you're going to be doing is you're going to start seeing what's happening beneath the conscious awareness and exactly when you, as a coach, as a person, as a spouse, as a friend, can intervene. All right, so let's get into what these three different pillars are. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is identity gravity. So what is identity gravity? Your mind, my mind, everyone's mind in this room today has a powerful drive to maintain consistency with how you see yourself. We all do that there. Every single one of us, our mind has a way of saying, this is who we are, this is who we are. And what our brain does, for those of you that have done NLP training or anything with cognitive neuroscience, you know that our brain actively predicts and filters information to protect that identity structure. This is what we do every single day. And we're going to call that identity gravity because it's always pulling us back to where we are. So think about gravity in the world, it always pulls us down. Okay, we don't fly away, the gravity pulls up. So our identity is being pulled back to where we are safe. This is what the brain is doing. So identity gravity. So identity gravity is the psychological pull that pulls people right back to the identity that's consistent with their patterns. So think about the person that wants to go to the gym or the leader that wants to delegate, all good, but they get pulled back to what is their consistent pattern. Even when they consciously want to do something different. Just remember, it's not psychological resistance. It's the mind, the neuroscience. Again, we think about the amygdala protecting us about coherence over growth. Adnan,
Yeah, this is an interesting um, framing of this. I just wanted to understand when you say identity gravity, are
yes,
we saying that the brain wants to go back to the perceived identity that it wants to create for us? Or are we saying that it subconsciously gets us to behave in that is like our habit or our norm, really? So is it
fantastic
the idea
question.
of the actual?
Fantastic question. It's the actual. So it's the perception. So, for example, let's just say, let's pick an example. Say Adnan January 1st comes along, you want to go to the gym, right? This as an example. So you haven't gone to the gym for 7, 8 years. That pattern's disappeared, right? So your identity is I'm not a gym person. I'm I'm quite happy with what I'm doing. Then what happens in January comes along, you create this new resolution and you want to start doing these behaviors here. And unless you shift the way you think about yourself, that you are now a gym person that is going to be healthy, your brain is actively going to draw you back to that pull of that I was this person on December the 31st that didn't go to the gym, didn't exercise. Unless you shift your mindset to your brain, basically telling your brain that I'm actually going to change the way I think about myself. So the identity gravity is the pull back to what you are because your brain is keeping you safe in that systems there. Because now you're doing something that's so different to what it's perception of safety. Keyword is always perception of safety. So it's the second one where you're going back to the perception of what you think is safe. Fantastic question. Fantastic question. And I know you love this because this is the world of NLP, which is really, Really cool. So I love your questions there. So how do we notice this here? So I use an example there of the gym, right? So, and again, basically is identity gravity is in languaging. So as an NLP practitioner, for those of you that have done NLP, you think about the language. It's in the language. And once you know what to listen for, it's pretty easy to pick that up. Okay. So for example, I'm not just confident. I've always been second best. That's just who I am. I'm not the kind of person that speaks up. Those key phrases here are not the truth. They're not the truth. They're your mind subconsciously with the language protecting your identity. Basically, they're your identity that declaring. It's just confirming the fact of what your brain says. So this is what I'm talking about, the coherence. So if I say to you, hey, I'm gonna say Kieran, I can say Kieran. Hey Kieran, from tomorrow you're gonna be a confident person, and Kieran's past is like, I'm actually not. I've always been a quiet person. So if I say to you, be confident tomorrow, that is not in coherence with the way your brain thinks, which is why it's not going to be working. So what I would love for you to do is think about yourself or even your clients. What is one identity declaration that you hear the most frequently from your clients or that you say about yourself? And I want you to drop it in the chat with the following phrase. Either I'm blah, 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 or I'm not. What identity structure are you protecting or are they protecting? So for example, I can go first. I could say, I'm not, I am not a confident speaker. That was me 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Or I have a client that I'm working with at the moment who whose every session starts off with, I'm just trying to protect my staff. That's it. That's all they're saying. So let's have a look at the chat here. Clients, I'm not good enough. Clients, I'm just a simple person. Yeah, we hear that very often. Client leans in, but okay, cool. So everyone else, just don't, there's no judgment here. This is, whether it's yourself or your clients, think about those statements that you hear the most often. And the reason we're doing that there is, and I want you to do that there is because when you see these here, each one of these is identity. It's the identity gravity at work. So yes, it's subconscious, but it's the languaging that's coming through. And when we think, let's go back into the chat here. Yeah, I'm not a good salesperson. I'm not a good speaker. Yeah. And those are not true. None of that is true, Shaveen, but it's the identity that's saying that. Or is it true? I don't know. That's the question. I don't think that'll work. Yeah. Just going to pause you if anybody has any questions, thoughts, observations, or comments. I'm not good at, yeah. So if we go back to each of those things there, again, each one of those is basically your client or yourself's identity gravity at work. So for example, I'm I'm not a good speaker is you pulling back to that there. So what happens when we do that there? What happens when we do that there? Yes, Karen.
Hi. I'm sorry, I joined a little late. I just wanted to have one small clarity, and that was when you're talking about identity statement, yes, it's obvious that it starts with I am most normally. Um,
Yeah.
what about I have? Like, I feel that that also speaks to identity, but like I have moved on. I
Yeah.
don't hold grudges or things
Yeah.
like that. So does that come into identity as well?
100%. So any fantastic question, Karen. This is great. So if you think about any of these identity statements, it's I am, I have, I should, I must, any of those languagings, which is your brain or yourself subconsciously um defending or proclaiming that identity of what it is. It's just something that you've it's ingrained. So for example, I grew up in an Indian household in Zimbabwe, and in my mind, I have ingrained for a very long time that I have to do certain cultural things at certain times. I have to because blah blah blah. Until the one day I questioned is why do I have to do this? Well, what, that was the question I asked my mum. Why do I have to do this here? And there was no answer. Well, the answer was, oh, because we've been doing it for a very long time. So the identity that was formed was because I was born in an Indian household. My identity was I have to do these things here. which I didn't have to do, but yes. Great, thanks, Karen. So anything with those languagings is really beautiful. Yeah. Adnan.
Yeah, I was just wondering when you talk about identity gravity, then you talked about the identity threat and the statements. Uh, um, where do values come in? Because a lot of this has to do with, and also what Kiran was saying. I think some of it has to do with the values that we embody or at least want to embody.
Yeah, so that's a great. I'll come to that as we go in today's session. If
All
I
right.
don't, then if I don't, then I failed. None, and you can send me a message and say you failed. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Maybe I'm not. So let's go back. All right, so the identity threat that I was going to talk about here is so what do we notice here? We think about, people that are highly intelligent, people that are very smart, people that are very capable. It's not that they have the lack of resources. Okay. You can have money, time, resources, all the people. You can have a coach, you can have a personal trainer, you can have a chef, but people still fail. Why? Because they fail because success is threatening the identity coherence. So you hear fear of failure sometimes, but there's also fear of success. If someone's identity structure includes I'm not a leader, or I'm not a speaker, or I'm not a great public speaker, and they're offered a leadership role or a speaking role or any of those roles there, what happens is their brain doesn't process this as an opportunity, it processes a threat. Now, I'm going to give you a clear example. When I'm part of a training organization where we train coaches, and we do 12 weeks of training. And then after 12 weeks, it's really interesting to notice that how many of those trained coaches still don't believe they're coaches. And think about how many, everyone in this room here, whether you're training people or whether you're working with people, how many people after the training still don't believe that they're because they don't see it as an opportunity, they see it as a threat because their coherence has changed. They have not been a coach or have not told themselves they're a coach or XYZ for so long that their brain reverts straight back to that because it's a threat to what they're normally doing. So again, this is all about how the brain of the amygdala is protecting you. So what happens then is you start unconsciously creating conditions for failure. What if I fail? What if this happens here? And it's not because you want to fail, but it's because failure brings you back to your identity coherence. Oh, I'm not a good enough coach, so therefore I'm going to go back and do what I was. Because your mind is choosing coherence over growth when the two are in conflict. So this is what happens when you're not in alliance. So some questions you can ask include, who are you being loyal to? So for example, the leader that here's leadership role. I don't want to be a leader. Who are you being loyal to? What relationship would be disrupted if you became a leader or a speaker? Who aren't you permitted to become? So these are questions that are going to be shifting the identity of the person. Okay. What it does here is you're not coaching towards goals, you start coaching towards the identity and expanding the client's identity. Who do they need to become for this goal to be, for them to shift their identity? Okay. So in these questions here, what you do is you listen for ceilings. You listen for this invisible blocks about ambition. You listen for permission structures. I need to wait for X, Y, Z. Who do they need authorization to before they can do what they need to do? You listen for protected versions. Which past self of them are they protecting or they bringing up? And when you start detecting those things, you can ask these different questions here. Who are you being loyal to? What are your relationships? Who aren't you permitted to? What it does for the client of whoever you're speaking to, it's not asking them for action. There's no action here at all. What it does is, as you know, as coaches here, it starts creating space for awareness. And when they think about this awareness piece here, this is when they start thinking about the identity reconstruction. Who am I actually? What do I actually want to be? That's the first phase. The next phase, that's the identity. The next one is meaning making loops. Okay. So what happens here is we've talked about identity gravity. Now we're going to talk about how the mind protects that identity through meaning making. So here's what we all need to know. Humans, each one of us, we don't experience reality. Okay, we all experience interpreted reality. Every single one of us experiences interpreted reality. So how do we know that? For example, we can all watch the exact same image of a football match or whatever match. We can all watch the exact same thing of reality, but each one of us is going to experience it very, very different because our interpretation of reality is very, very different. And the crazy thing about that there is interpretation happens faster than conscious awareness. Interpretation happens faster than conscious awareness here. And here's the interesting thing here. The mind, to each one of our minds, doesn't assign a random meaning to something. It assigns a meaning that comes from your identity over and over and on repeat. And that's where the loop comes in. Okay? So the way I like to break it down is a meaning-making loop has 5 stages here. And the 5 stages are, number 1, we have a trigger. Stimulus occurs. It could be an email, it could be a comment, it could be a silence in the meeting, it could be someone saying an offhand comment. That is the trigger. Number 2 is an instant interpretation. So before the conscious mind starts processing, your mind assigns meaning based on pattern matching with past experience and your identity. So for example, let's just say you get an email from your manager or your boss. A client does. And every email that they've got over the last 5 or 6 weeks, that email has indicated it's a bad message. So straight away, before even opening the email, their heart sinks to like, oh no, I've interpreted that this is going to be something bad. What happens then straight away is you have your emotional cascades. Oh, this is bad here. The interpretation now triggers a second thing. So you've got the first trigger, you've now got the second trigger. It's triggering an emotional response within. So your body starts preparing for whatever that meaning is. Not the event, but the meaning. Then you have your behavior. And your behavior comes from the emotional state. You either withdraw, you overcompensate, you attack, or you avoid. And what happens then? Because you've done that there, your identity is being reinforced. Because you're acting from emotion. Your behavior confirms your original interpretation because you are going on a cycle here. See, I wasn't respected. This proves that. It's just looking for those habits there, and it keeps repeating. Same trigger, same response, same loop. Same trigger, same response, same loop, but it gets faster and faster and faster every time you do it, and it becomes automatic here. Okay, so let me give you an example here. You have a client that comes to you and they've received feedback, okay, about how they've got to develop. The feedback is balanced, it's constructive, and it's got an appreciation of their work. Okay, like every great manager, they say some good things, some great things. But what happens if your client comes in and says, you know what? My boss is terrible. Why? Because in that moment I felt my chest tighten, I swallowed, I had shallow breathing, my mind is racing. But not because the meaning was harsh, but because the system assigned the meaning to it. Okay? So basically what they assigned was the fact that I'm incompetent. That's all they looked at. I'm going to lose credibility. I should have known better. That meaning triggers shame, the emotional cascade. That then has a hypervigilance, withdrawal, and they stop contributing in meetings because all they see is that there. And it's just going to be keep repeating the loop here. So the actual event isn't the problem. The fact that the manager gave feedback isn't the problem. It's the meaning assigned to the problem that we all assign. So think about this in your life. As you think about yourself as people, how many times do you assign meaning to things before you even see the thing, the event? Okay. So here's think about this here. We love doing exercises here. Think of a client or think of yourself. Okay, yourself as well. And you continually hit the same obstacle over and over again, despite the fact that you're intelligent and you're aware. Think about that for a second. Now think about what is the meaning in their system or your system that is likely assigned to the situation. And you can put this in the chat here. What meaning are you giving to the situation here? Or what are they giving to the situation? There's no right or wrong answer here. Just have a think about that. Parents, their own comfort, yes. Yep, their own comfort. So basically, the meaning is going to keep running in the background. Every time they hit the same obstacle, they're telling themselves the same story. They're giving themselves the same meaning. And they're finding meanings to justify however they're feeling because they have that emotional cascade. That event will cause the same outcome. Yep, will be negative again. Yep, patterns down comfort, secondary gains. Yep, exactly. Beautiful. So each one of those is a call to action for yourself, for your client to think about exactly what they're doing. So how do you interrupt this loop here that keeps going on and on and on forever and ever and ever? Okay. So here's what you do is you don't challenge the behavior. Okay, because the behavior, if you think about it, is downstream of emotion, then behavior. So we don't challenge that there. What we need to do is we need to interrupt the message meaning before it becomes automatic. So let's go back to this here. If we go to behavior, which is stage 4, we're missing the emotional and the interpretation. So if we do that, then we're never ever going to get down to what the actual cause is. So what we have to think about is we have to think about, let's go forward. Sorry, let's go backwards. Sorry. So we ask questions like, what meaning did you assign? What interpretation generated that response there? What alternative meaning might you choose with time to reflect? The key thing is with time to reflect, because remember, everything happens so quick here. So what happens is when you bring unconscious processing into conscious awareness, you start activating reflection. So think about meditation or journals. What are they actually doing? When you ask those reflective questions, it takes you away from the moment in time and it puts you into a reflective state. If we go back here, what it does is it takes you away from the identity reinforcement and goes right back here to the interpretation that you gave it, because now you're reflecting back. And at that point in time, you can then choose. So when the meaning changes, here, the emotion changes. And when the emotion changes, the behavior changes. And when the behavior changes, that identity starts changing organically. So we've had identity gravity, which is what we come to. We have the meaning patterns. And now we're going to talk about the third part, which are your human signals. Okay. Before I carry any questions about that. All right. The next part is human signals. Okay. So this is the part that we all, this is the part I love, and I think all of you in this room here also, I appreciate you all because I'm sure you'll pick this up here. This is the part that we got to think about in any conversation that we have. And like I said at the start, people are always talking about who they are, but really with their words. People are constantly broadcasting their internal state through channels they're not consciously controlling. So think about any conversation that you have, even yourself. People say, I'm gonna see who can. People, I'm gonna go down here. People might say, "Hey, Sobia, that was a great question, great answer. But you're not smiling at that. Oh, I didn't realize I wasn't smiling. Okay, because your body is subconsciously already having those cues there. Because your nervous system, your expressions, your tone of voice are all somatic responses. They're not voluntary. They're automatic outputs of unconscious processing. So if we just listen to language and we think about this, most language is not the verbal language, it's basically our non-verbal communication. And this is what we're missing. So what is the body actually broadcasting? What are human signals? So human signals are basically somatic. They're paralinguistic cues that we pick up for, and they reveal what is happening behind the conscious observation. So things like nervous laughter. So when you have nervous laughter following a statement, yeah, I'm gonna be a fantastic speaker. Nervous laughter. So what is happening at that point in time? The laughter is actually showing that the person is anxious about that new identity that they're going to create. You're going to be, yes, I'm going to be a confident leader. and then have a smile or a laugh. Because again, that nervous laugh is indicating that they don't believe that there. Over justification of a simple decision. So when someone, so for example, a client or anyone in the rooms, they give you a long-winded answer to explain why they can't attend a meeting or why they can't put something up on an Instagram post or a LinkedIn post, they're not explaining anything to you. All that they're doing is they're self-regulating through a narrative. The next one is a deflection through humor. So when they have something that comes up, they deflect using humor. You ask a deep question, they crack a joke. Because what are they doing? They're protecting themselves from being vulnerable. Vulnerability is really important and it's really key, but how do we do that? We navigate by having humor in those sessions there. Or the voice shifts around responsibility. So here's a challenge for you. I'd love for you to listen when a voice becomes quieter, faster, or loses inflection, so it becomes monotone. That's signaling that the client is feeling a threat and diverting back to the identity gravity. Or they use language like we said before, this was asked before, language like should versus want. Should indicates external control. Want indicates internal agency. So we asked the question before, should, have to, must. Those are signal examples of what the body is saying, or the brain is saying. So when we talk about this here is, again, this is something you could probably write down or you can think about, is when the language and the body conflicts, always trust the body. So think about any conversation that you have in your world, again, not just in your coaching world, but whether it's with a friend or a spouse, when the language and the body conflict, trust the body. Okay? Why? Because truth rarely lives in explicit language. It lives in how the body responds to whatever is being discussed. So, for example, someone can say, I'm committed to this, while their whole body broadcast shut down. Their voice becomes constricted, they raise their shoulders, they start breathing differently, they don't look at you, they're looking elsewhere. The words say, I'm committed, but the body's saying, nah, I don't believe that at all. And as a coach or as someone that's looking at, they look at those body cues because the body is more honest. Because what it's doing is responding to that unconscious processing of that identity we spoke about before. It's going back to the gravity pull. Like Adnan asked before, subconsciously going back to that identity, which the body feels safe around. So how do you do this here? How do you actually start reading these signals here? Okay. So what you do is the first way you think about it is look for incongruence between the language and the somatic state. If the explicit content doesn't match the body activation, trust the body always. First one, so body, somatic versus words. Number two, linguistic repetition patterns. So if someone uses identical phrases all the time across multiple contexts, they're not describing anything, they're just protecting their narrative. So think about clients or people that you work with, they use the same phrases all the time when you talk about a particular topic. Basically, they're just again reverting back to their gravity. The third one is the energy shift. So notice sudden changes in the arousal level. Notice how their voice pitch might increase, their breath changes, or the other way, how the energy just collapses. They might sit back, they might sit forward. And as a coach, this is where you think about, when did that happen? What did I say, or what did they say for that change to happen? And the one that's the number one thing for us to always think about is the topic avoidance patterns. What questions get deflected? What subjects trigger different responses? Because what is happening at that point in time is when a client or yourself or a person is avoiding that there, it's because you're challenging the identity. Which is why if you think about in the ICF core competencies, we give lots and lots of time for a pause, the power in the pause. Because in that pause there, you as a coach are going to pick up the somatic changes. So let's ask yourself a question. Again, think about your most recent coaching conversation or your most whatever session that you had. Also for yourself or conversation, were there any somatic signals that you noticed in a retrospect? So if you think about the last session, did I miss something? And I do this all the time. When I finish my coaching sessions, I always think about, what did I miss? Did I miss something? if the words are not matching. And think about that. You can put in the chat or you can unmute if you want to as well, because, we'd love some somatic responses here, not just chats. Adnan got my joke. Fantastic, Adnan. Thank you. I saw you laughing, which is great. Yeah. Yeah, maybe a lack of self-trust. Yep. So there's different things that come through, but you pick up those cues there. So my challenge for you as you go forward, think about those non-verbal cues you can pick up: the breath, the posture, the avoidance, the deflection. Because all that is happening right at that point in time is, if we go back to our lovely slide, we are going right back to the first pull of the identity gravity. So if you think about the way I've structured this here, the identity gravity is the base of everything. The meaning making and the human signals always lead us right back to identity gravity. So if you think about a vertex, this is what it's coming back to. Adnan,
Yeah,
vortex,
I
sorry.
think one thing that is very subtle usually is when the client keeps shifting their position, their sitting position, right? So they'll move here, they'll move there, then they'll put one leg on the other, then the other leg, and so on. And so the key idea is to see, okay, the restlessness, and also when is the shift happening. It's typically at very critical times when they're changing a narrative or thinking a lot. So yeah, that's something which I noticed.
100%. And this is also interesting. It can happen in a Zoom as well. It doesn't have to be in person. When a client shifts a little bit, and as a coach, you think, okay, when did that happen? When did they sit back? When did they drop their shoulders? When did they become silent? That's a great, great observation. Hira,
I
nice to
just
see you.
wanted to share something. So sometimes the client doesn't really want to address the problem. They're just so happy with the problem. And that comes out in, for example, they're talking about a problem, but they're just so happy about it, you know. And the words just don't match the behavior because they're happily talking about a situation that they would like to change. And it's like a challenge to the coach that this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. So we had like a fishbowl activity last week in a mentoring session, and what came up at the end was that the client, the person who was in the spotlight, was just so happy with the problem. You know, she wanted to put it out as a challenge for all the coaches out there. you know so that also happens, and I've realized, I reflected on it, that this does happen with clients also. Sometimes they're just so comfortable with whatever they're unhappy with that the behavior and the what they're saying doesn't match you know
Yeah,
does it make sense?
that does make sense. That does make sense. I've observed it a few times. And this is when you, as a coach, can challenge them and say, okay, client, you've brought this up as a problem, but I'm here, I'm seeing you smiling, I'm seeing you this, because the patterns they're not matching, right? So as we said before, the congruence is not there. So
Yeah, the
as a
energy
coach,
isn't matching.
yeah, 100%. So as a coach, you can challenge that. You can challenge that and say, okay, thank you for sharing there. You can ask any of these questions here, any of these kind of questions here. Yeah, so you can say, okay, fantastic, cool. So who are you being loyal to right now? So at this point in time, when you ask that question, when they're being a fishbowl exercise, they're not being loyal to anybody else. They're just playing a game, right? So that one question you can say, thank you for sharing this here. But right now, client, I'm going to ask you one question. Who are you being loyal to right now in this situation? Just let it be. But yes, people do that there. Kieran, thanks, Hira, for that.
I just wanted to ask regarding the Adnan mentioned about the shifting of weight or, moving around or whatever. What if the person's just a fidget? That happens too.
Yeah. So
Like, I
fantastic.
mean, well,
So
let's say when I talk to my son, he has a tendency to bounce around a lot when he talks. That doesn't
mhm.
necessarily mean he's thinking very hard about the topic or he's, trying to hide something or if he just happens to bounce. And how do we differentiate between, okay, this is something we have to assign meaning to versus that's just the person?
Beautiful, beautiful. Now this is great MCC kind of coaching here. This is when you got to think about which is normal behavior versus not normal behavior. So so you might have a client that fidgets all the time, and then when you ask a question, they might stop fidgeting. Just the converse happens, they might stop fidgeting, right? Because now you've got them to a different level. So you're going to start picking up cues, and you're going to go, okay, so first session, okay, you're just getting, okay, I can see my client moves a bit, and that's okay. Second session, okay, this is your awareness now. So the somatic stuff is not just, oh, they're always fidgeting, like Anand said. It's about picking up when it's a point of difference, when they're not their normal self. This is where it becomes different. But great. Anand.
Prajesh, we have a question in the chat
Oh,
by
sorry.
Nazia. Yeah, and then some very insightful comment from Mariam and Hira, but Nazia has a question.
Okay, I have a question. If we take if we take problem and solution as clear, black and white. Nazia, do you want to unmute yourself and explain what the question means?
Yeah, basically, I just wanted to know that if someone has shared any sort of problem and that individual has also a solution, which is not complete sort of solution, but the client gets some sort of direction and get some sort of ideas that how the client can deal with that situation. So can we consider this as a black and white sort of thing, or there would be some sort of grayish area that yes, by this a small thing we can consider that the client can proceed accordingly with a sort of thing.
Fantastic. What a great question. So as coaches, our job is not to give the client solutions. Our role is to help them move progress into whatever state it is. So if a client comes to you with an XY, they want to, let's just say I want to become a leader, for example, and this is what they want to do. And through your coaching, the first step that they take is they enroll in a Toastmasters coach. That's all they do. So they're on the step towards becoming a leader. So there's no black and white. It's when the client feels that they've been successful. So as you know, in the ICF coaching, the first thing you do in the agreement stage is you ask the client, what does a successful session look like for you today? And they'll tell you what it looks like. And at the end, you can ask the client, what was the most helpful thing from today's session? Or how do you feel today's session? What is the most helpful thing? As long as there's any progress, so it's not black or white, it's about as long as the needle is moving forward. Even if it's slightly, even if it's 0.5%, as long as it's moving forward in the forward direction, not the backward direction. But sometimes in the session, the client will say they haven't had any change, and that's okay. But then the change might happen 2 days when they are driving to work or in the shower, that they go, Nazia asked that fantastic question. It's come to me now. So it's the power of the pause which comes into play as well, and time between the sessions. Hopefully that helped, Nazia.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time here. Okay, so how do we integrate all three here? Okay, so we've talked about all three: the identity gravity, the meaning making, and the human signals. So basically, what I want to show you how they operate as an integrated system. So, like I said, Mindfluence is this little lovely theory that I've created here. Look up for the book, maybe. There's three layers there. Identity gravity, which is the coherence patterns. Is there a match there? Meaning making is the interpretation that the client or yourself are putting towards something and how your body's responding. And what happens when you see all of these simultaneously? As a coach, things start changing for you quite dramatically because you're observing not the words, but you're looking at the behaviors and the languaging that they're using that they're not saying. The languaging that they're using, what they're not saying. Okay, let that sit there. Okay. So I've got a few minutes to go, so I'm just going to miss out a couple of things here. This is not that important here. No, we're going to miss out this here. Okay. So what I'd love for you to do is over the next, few sessions, think about which one you're going to track. Are you going to track the identity gravity, the meaning making loops, or the human signals? Just pick one. Just pick one. Because when you start picking one, what it's going to do, it's going to help you. It's going to help you get better in that there. And, is it the languaging? And here's something that I would love for you to do, if your client permits you, is to record the session. record the Zoom session and just observe yourself and observe just for your own learning. You know, a lot of times we jump on a call and they say, "Oh, this call will be recorded for blah 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 for training purposes." Same thing as well. You go on a session and you can just observe yourself and your client and go, "What did I miss? What didn't I miss? What did I pick up?" It's a great way just to train yourself as you start watching. Or also when you're watching when you're in coaching sessions, watch other people and go, "What am I picking up there?" And just think about those signals that you're picking up on and what you're getting better and better. And think about the questions you can ask. So I know time is running out. So I just wanted to leave us with a couple of quotes here. So mastery isn't all just asking better questions, it's about making informed awareness. So we think about the kind of things that we want to do. So what I want us all to take away after today's session here today is the key thing is here, people don't need to be changed. Okay? People don't need to be changed. They need to see their own patterns. And they need to see them with enough clarity so they can choose differently. So they are then becoming more aware of what the automatic system predicts. And this is what the integration of those three pillars give you. The ability to facilitate that level of seeing, not through advice, not through frameworks, not through behavior modification, but through informed awareness, through naming the unconscious process, through creating conditions where the conscious choice becomes possible. And this is probably as any coach sitting in this room today, if you think about any technique out there, they're fantastic. But once you have that awareness there, it just changes things quite dramatically here. So before I end up today, I just want us to remember that every conversation that you facilitate or in, whether it's coaching, whether it's whoever it is, it's facilitating patterns, theirs and yours. The awareness you bring shapes transformation in both directions. Remember, there's two of us. So this work isn't just about other people, it's about yourself as well. Noticing your own identity gravity, noticing your own meaning-making loops, noticing your own human signals. Because once you think about yourself, yes, it's great to do all that, but what about yourself? So my challenge for each one of you out there, what is the identity that you gravitate to? What meaning-making loops do you have in your mind all the time? And maybe you need to ask somebody to think about, what kind of human signals you're showing out. Because when you start doing this here, you stop looking at surface level stuff. And you're not looking at behaviors, you're looking at what I like to call the power of mindfluence. And that, everybody, is what I've covered today. So today's journey, we spoke about what we missed, the identity, and how to apply this here. And if we go back to the main grid, I want you to remember this in any conversation that you have. What you see is not what you see sometimes. It's in the what you don't see where the true magic happens here. A bit like this grid here. You see a dot somewhere, then you close your eyes, the dot goes elsewhere. The patterns, the meaning that we give to it is the meaning that we've told ourselves and the story we've told ourselves. So this is me. I've ended at 8 p.m. exactly. Any question? I'm going to stop the share now, and thank you everybody for giving me your time today.
Thank you, Prajesh. That was such a wonderfully insightful discussion, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. I know my takeaways were huge in terms of the identity and the pondering over the deeper meaning between what the client is saying and what they actually are transmitting through their body cues and signals. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you once again. Will you be sharing the presentation?
No,
Or
worries at
some
all.
handouts?
I'm just going to put a handout in the chat now if I can. Does anyone have any questions while I'm here?
Yeah, we're open to questions. I know we were allowed to ask questions. We did a lot of them during the presentation, but any questions on the overall thing now that it is concluded?
Yeah, and this program is also recorded. So if the presentation would be, of course, running in that program, in that recording. And thank you very much, Prajesh, again. If there is any comment or
Fakia had raised your
any
hand.
questions.
Yes.
Yeah,
Any
okay.
questions?
Okay, so quickly, I think so. Brilliant, and very, very insightful presentation. There was so much for me to kind of like, I mean, so it's not that there are a lot of new things, but then there is a beautiful take on the things which we perhaps know already, but that really, really makes you think. And I would really, especially when you started with the gravity point or the anchors, identity anchors and all, and even the last quote, I think so for me, that really hit home, that where it is not about changing people, but actually, kind of giving them the choice to look differently and providing that kind of clarity. Thank you for such a wonderful session. There was a lot for me to learn, and I picked up a lot of points. And thank you, Umar and Romana. It was wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. Can I just add something there? Again, everything I've said today is nothing new, right? It's just, and I love the ways that we all know about this, but it's how we change our lens and what we know. And if you think about all coaching, if we go right back, whether it's Jim Rohn or Florence Foster Shinn or Tony Robbins, it's all the same, but it's a different lens that we look at it, and those different lenses make things more palatable for different people. So thank you for raising that there, because we all know this here. It's just the lens we look at it and the language we use.
Prajesh, I just wanted to say thank you very much. Of course, as coaches, these concepts are all familiar to us, but you very nicely and precisely outlined the underlying process of how everything moves in the client's mind. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Can I say one thing? I think the way you put out the loop, identifying the trigger, and then how that loop ultimately reinforces the identity. I think that was a really, really, really powerful thing, and certainly something that I've not come across in this way. So in CBT, for example, or in other things, we look at okay, this is the trigger. Now this is how you resolve it. But to look at it from this lens, that this is first, before that there's an identity that's being reinforced before anything else can happen. So I think looking at triggers from that way was really powerful for me, and really insightful to look at how people behave. So thank you very much for that, particularly. Overall, but particularly this one.
My pleasure. I appreciate that. Thank you, Adan. That means a lot coming from you. I respect what you say, so thank you so much. Beautiful.
Great. So
thank you all. Thank you all for having me. Thank you all
yeah,
for having
thank you
me.
very
It's
much
really
for
a real pleasure.
Prajesh, thank you very much, and thank you very much. Thank you to all who have joined today. And Romana, if there is anything that you would like to share at the end.
Romana, you're mute. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, got it. I think what a lot of the information that was shared has a lot to do with the neuroscience and the technology and the advancements of how the mind is working. Neuro leadership talks a lot about these factors as well. I love the way that Prajesh was able to put them all together in a concise, simplified manner. Because sometimes reading the neuroscience books, I know my clients tell me, gets to be a little cumbersome for them. So I think we need these snippets from people like him to be able to make sense for the not the scientifically too advanced people, as a result of which the knowledge can be transmitted to a lot more and made use of at this point in time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, Prajesh. We appreciate everything you've brought to us today, and we look forward to seeing more of you in subsequent areas and sessions.
Yeah, just one final thing. This is our those who have joined new today. This is our monthly event that we do every last Friday at 11 a.m. And inshallah, the next one will be on 24th of no 30th of January. Yeah, 30th of January, Friday, again at 11 a.m. And the information about who is the speaker, who is the host, will soon be flashing in next week, inshallah, on different WhatsApp groups and our LinkedIn pages also. So thank you very much, Romana. It was wonderful having you, and Prajesh, thank you very much for joining us today and giving us a good insights about this aspect and perspectives of coaching, and all the participants. Thank you very much. So take good care of yourself, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ji. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Khudafis.
Thank you.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.